I introduced all three papers on January 3rd, and honestly, I feel like January 3rd, even though that was about 8 months ago, I feel like that legislation could have probably been introduced sooner because many Atlantans, unfortunately, are being victimized by what we call traffic violence, and particularly pedestrians. Our most vulnerable residents are getting hit by cars at a much higher rate than we've ever experienced in the city. It's a trend that is happening nationwide, not only across Georgia, but across the country, and something snapped in a lot of motorists' heads during the pandemic, and people have been driving more and more recklessly. The sizes of vehicles have gotten bigger over the years, and unfortunately that has meant that more people, particularly people who don't own a car, who take longer to cross the street because they're older, they're more likely to be victimized in a crash with a car. And so this legislation, all three legislation works together to essentially help design our streets more oriented towards people instead of towards cars. So the two legislative items that passed today, one essentially prohibits new drive-through restaurants from opening or operating within the BeltLine overlay. The BeltLine is one of our city's most important walking areas, so we want to make sure that that is reflected in the land use and the zoning. And so, cars coming in and out of drive-through restaurants is not safe for pedestrians. One of the other legislative items prohibits new gas stations. So gas stations have big giant curb cuts, and cars are coming in and out, and motorists aren't always paying attention to people trying to walk down the street on the sidewalk. And so those two legislative items were successful today, preventing essentially new establishments from taking place that have those sorts of uses. We're not saying that you can't have a fast food restaurant or a dry cleaners. We're just saying you can't have a drive-through associated with that. The paper that did not get passed today, but did go back before committee, essentially says the city is going to get out of the way of requiring developers to build X amount of parking spaces. Unfortunately, that requirement has led to developers building huge seas of giant parking lots, building giant parking podiums and parking structures, more than what the developer might actually need for the coffee shop or the restaurant or the housing that they're building to support the community. And so we're saying, hey, let the developer figure that out. The city's not going to require it, because a lot of times they overbuilding parking, and when you have cars coming in and out and people trying to walk down the street, data shows that pedestrians are more likely, or there's a higher rate of being victimized by traffic violence in those instances. And particularly in communities that I represent, those victims typically are Black people or low-income people who can't afford a car or just trying to get to the bus stop. And in fact, across the city of Atlanta, 75% of pedestrian injuries and fatalities are Black people. And so I look at this as a racial justice or racial equity issue, not just saving lives, but saving lives of our most vulnerable residents.